A week of rain and memories. The deluge began the day after Tom's funeral, a ceaseless, sorrowful drumming against the glass, mirroring the relentless pulse of Alara's sorrow. Each plummeting drop seemed to bear a fragment of her grief, an insistent echo of the void Tom had left. She sat in his worn leather armchair, a silent sentinel facing the sprawling garden, now a smudged tapestry of muted greens and grays. Her tea, long since cooled, offered no warmth. Its vapor had vanished, like so many of her hopes. 7 days had passed since his hand's comforting weight had rested in hers. 7 days since his laughter had graced these rooms. The ensuing silence was a roar, broken only by the persistent patter and the house's occasional groan as it settled. It felt as if the very world wept alongside her, a vast, unending lament. Her gaze drifted to the small framed photograph on the mantel, Tom arm casually slung around her, both of them beaming, squinting into a summer sun. A spontaneous coastal escape years ago. She replayed that day, the deserted beach, wind whipping their hair, the invigorating salty spray. Tom, ever the dreamer, had pointed out a gnarled piece of driftwood. Imagine the stories it could tell, Elira, he'd mused, eyes alight. All the tides it's seen, all the storms it's weathered. She'd laughed, leaning into him. You're such a dreamer, Tom Vance. He'd squeezed her tight. And you, my love, are the best part of my dream. A bittersweet smile touched Elara's lips now. Tom had a gift for unearthing beauty in the mundane, magic in the everyday. He taught her to see it too, to cherish quiet moments, shared glances, unspoken understandings. He viewed the world through a lens of profound affection, a perspective that always made her feel safe, cherished, truly seen. She rose, her movements stiff. The house, typically a comforting embrace, now felt vast and hollow. Every object held a memory, a wisp of Tom's presence. The stack of gardening magazines, the half-read novel by his bed, even the slight indentation in his pillow, each a poignant testament to a life abruptly curtailed. Elara moved into the kitchen, the erstwhile heart of their home. Once the scent of coffee and toast had greeted her, Tom already up, humming as he prepared breakfast. Now the air hung still, carrying only the faint metallic tang of coal. She ran her hand over the smooth granite counter, a surface they'd chosen together, debating shades and finishes. This one feels solid, Elara, Tom had declared, tapping it thoughtfully. Like us, built to last. The memory brought a fresh sting to her eyes. Built to last, yes, but not forever, not for her. She opened the refrigerator, scanning its contents without purpose. A half-eaten yogurt, some wilting greens. Tom had always kept it meticulously stocked, even labeling leftovers in his neat hand. Now it was a haphazard collection, mirroring her own disarray. Elara closed the fridge, turning from the stark reminder of her solitude. She wandered back into the living room, the rain still relentless. Her gaze sought the garden again, recalling another rainy day. Not long ago, Tom had been out there, despite the drizzle, pruning roses. She'd watched him from the window, a warm mug in her hands, a contented sigh escaping her lips. He'd looked up, caught her eye, and offered a soft, knowing smile. A silent conversation, a perfect moment. How many such moments had they shared? Too many to count, too precious to lose. Yet they were all she had left. These memories, both joyous and mundane, were the threads that kept her tethered, anchors in a sea of grief. They were also a source of quiet strength, a reminder of the love that still bound them, even across the chasm of death. She knew she couldn't simply curl up and drown. Tom wouldn't have wanted that. He'd always been a man of action, of resilience. He'd prepared her for everything, or so she thought. But nothing could have braced her for this silence, this profound absence. The rain continued its mournful symphony. Elara closed her eyes, picturing Tom's face, hearing his voice. She knew with a certainty that transcended grief that she would find her way. not because she was inherently strong, but because Tom had loved her enough to forge that strength within her. He had given her a quiet steel, an inner resolve she was only just beginning to rediscover, and perhaps somewhere within the echoing quiet of this house, amidst the rain and the memories, she would find a path forward, a path Tom had, in his own thoughtful way, already illuminated for her. An unexpected visit. The seventh day after the funeral brought no respite from the rain, only a deepening gray that seemed to leach the color from the world. Elara had spent the morning nursing a mug of tea, tracing the condensation on the window pane, lost in the quiet hum of the house. Tom's absence was a physical ache, a gaping void where laughter and gentle reassurances used to be. She was contemplating a slow walk through the sodden garden, hoping the chill air might clear the fog in her head when a car rumbled up the drive, her brow furrowed. No one ever visited unannounced, not since Tom had taken ill. A quick glance out the window confirmed her apprehension. A sleek, dark sedan, too polished for country roads, idled in front of the house, and emerging from it, like two storm clouds on an already dreary day, were Brenda and Mark. Brenda, Tom's older sister, was a woman who believed in making an entrance. Today she was clad in an impeccably tailored navy suit, clutching an expensive leather handbag to her chest like a shield. Her expression was a formidable blend of grim determination and barely concealed impatience. Mark, her husband, trailed a few steps behind, his usually cheerful face a muted canvas of discomfort, his gaze flitting nervously between Brenda's rigid back and the front door. A knot tightened in Elara's stomach. This wasn't a condolence call. She knew it in the way Brenda squared her shoulders, in the way Mark avoided her eyes. Taking a deep breath, Elara opened the door before they could knock, a polite if strained smile touching her lips. Brenda! Mark! What a surprise! Brenda offered a curt nod, her gaze sweeping past Elara, assessing the hallway, the familiar framed photographs, the coat rack where Tom's old jacket still hung. Elara, we thought it best to come by. There are things that need sorting. Her voice, usually sharp, had a forced softness that grated on Elara's ears. It was the kind of softness reserved for uncomfortable truths, not genuine sympathy. Mark offered a small, apologetic shrug, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. Yes, well, Brenda felt it was important to address things sooner rather than later. Elara's smile faltered. The quiet sanctity of her grief felt violated by their abrupt arrival, by the unspoken agenda that hung heavy in the air. Things? What things? She stepped back, gesturing them inside, though the gesture felt more like a concession than an invitation. The cool, damp air followed them in, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and something else, an uncomfortable tension. Brenda marched directly into the living room, her heels clicking purposefully on the polished wooden floor. She surveyed the room as if conducting an inspection, her eyes lingering on the comfortable armchair where Tom used to read, on the half-finished crossword on the coffee table. Tom's affairs, Elara, his estate. There's a lot to consider, and frankly, we can't afford to let things languish. Elara's jaw tightened. Languish, she repeated, the word tasting bitter. It's only been a week, Brenda. I'm still grieving. The raw edge in her voice was unmistakable, a fragile protest against the cold pragmatism Brenda radiated. Brenda finally met Elara's gaze, though her eyes held no warmth. Of course, dear, and we all are. Tom was my brother, after all, but grief doesn't pay the bills, does it, or manage assets. Mark and I simply want to help ensure everything is handled properly, fairly. The word fairly was delivered with an emphasis that suggested Elara might have a different, less fair interpretation. Mark, who had been hovering by the doorway, cleared his throat. Brenda just means to make sure everything is in order, Elara, for everyone's peace of mind. He shot a nervous glance at Brenda, who gave him a sharp, almost imperceptible flick of her wrist. silencing him. Elara felt a sudden chill unrelated to the damp weather. Their presence, their words, were a jarring intrusion, a dissonant chord in the quiet symphony of her sorrow. It was as if they had walked into her home with a checklist, prepared to dissect Tom's life into neat, manageable categories, completely disregarding the emotional wreckage he had left behind. Her grief, which had been a heavy, suffocating blanket, now felt momentarily pushed aside, replaced by a prickle of unease, a nascent defensiveness. "I appreciate your concern," Elara said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "But I assure you, I am perfectly capable of handling Tom's affairs when the time is right." Brenda's lips thinned into a tight line. "Time, Elara, is often of the essence, and with Tom, well, he wasn't always the most organized, was he?" The implication hung in the air, a subtle insult to Tom and by extension to Elara herself. "It's for the best, believe me. We just want to sort things out." The phrase, innocent enough on its own, now felt like a veiled threat, a precursor to an unwelcome inquisition. Elara looked at Brenda's unyielding face, then at Mark's shuffling feet, and knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that her quiet grief was about to be profoundly disrupted. The question of the safe. The scent of stale coffee still clung to the air from Brenda's earlier brewing efforts, a stark contrast to the usual warmth Elara associated with her kitchen. Brenda, now perched on a stool at the island, meticulously wiped down the already spotless countertop with a damp cloth, her movements precise and almost aggressive. Mark, meanwhile, was fiddling with a loose floorboard near the pantry, his brow furrowed in a pantomime of diligence. The silence, stretched taut between them, felt heavier than the grief Elara still carried. "So," Brenda began, her voice cutting through the quiet, sharper than the edge of a newly sharpened knife. She finally looked up, her gaze pinning Elara. "About the safe." Elara's breath hitched. She'd known this was coming, a gnawing premonition since Brenda's arrival, but the directness still startled her. She tried to keep her expression neutral, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "What about it?" Brenda set the cloth down, folding it into an immaculate square. "Tom always kept important documents in a safe, behind that dreadful sailing ship painting in the study, if I recall correctly." She gestured vaguely towards the hallway leading to Tom's sanctuary, the room Elara had barely entered since his death. The painting in question, a vibrant seascape depicting a storm-tossed schooner, was a gift from Elara to Tom on their 5th anniversary. She had always loved it. Brenda's dismissal of it as dreadful felt like another subtle jab. A knot tightened in Elara's stomach. Tom had shown her the safe once, a small, unassuming metal box cleverly concealed behind the hinged painting. He'd smiled, a conspiratorial glint in his eyes, and said, "This is just for us, Elara, our secrets, our dreams, our future. No one else needs to know what's in here." The memory was a warm, private ember in the cold ashes of her grief, a testament to their shared intimacy. He'd never specified what was inside, only that it was theirs alone. I'm not sure what you're referring to," Elara said, her voice a little too thin, a telltale waver she hoped Brenda wouldn't detect. She felt a prickle of shame for lying, but a fierce protectiveness flared within her. This was Tom's legacy, their private world. Brenda had no right to trespass. Brenda's lips thinned. "Don't be coy, Elara. We know about the safe. Father told me about it years ago, before he passed. He said Tom was always far too sentimental, hoarding things. He likely kept his will in there, along with other valuable family heirlooms." Her eyes flickered around the kitchen as if assessing its contents for their worth. "It's imperative we access it to sort out Tom's estate properly, for everyone's benefit, of course." The implication hung in the air. thick and unwelcome. Ilara was incapable, perhaps even untrustworthy, of managing Tom's affairs. Or worse, that she might try to hide something. The familiar ache of injustice stirred within her. Mark, who had stopped his floorboard inspection, shuffled closer, his gaze avoiding Ilara's. Brenda's right, Ilara. Tom was always very organized. He'd want us to make sure everything is handled correctly. For the family. He wrung his hands, a nervous habit. His words, though delivered gently, felt like a betrayal. He was usually so kind, so understanding, but beneath Brenda's watchful eye, he seemed to shrink, his own opinions fading into hers. Ilara's jaw tightened. Tom and I had our own arrangements, she said, her voice gaining a surprising strength. He wouldn't have wanted anyone else interfering with his personal effects, especially not so soon after. She trailed off, the raw pain of his absence still too sharp to articulate. Brenda scoffed, a short, humorless sound. Personal effects. This isn't about sentiment, Ilara. This is about legalities, about what's fair, and about ensuring the family's legacy is protected. You might not understand these things being, well, not blood. The word struck Ilara like a physical blow, a cruel reminder of her outsider status in their family. Not blood, as if her years with Tom, their shared life, their profound love, meant nothing. A cold fury began to simmer beneath her grief. Tom had always made her feel like the most cherished part of his world, not an appendage. There's nothing in there that concerns you, Ilara stated, her voice now firm, unwavering. Whatever Tom had in that safe, it was for us, for our future. The unspoken "not yours" hung heavy in the air between them. Brenda's eyes narrowed, a glint of steel within their depths. We'll see about that, won't we? Mark, go ahead and get that painting down. We'll open it now. She gestured imperiously towards the study, her expression unwavering, an unshakable determination etched onto her face. Mark hesitated for a fraction of a second, glancing at Ilara with a flicker of apology in his eyes, before slowly, reluctantly, heading towards the study. Ilara watched him go, a sense of dread pooling in her stomach. The safe, her private sanctuary of Tom's memories, was about to be breached, and she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that whatever was inside, Brenda would find a way to twist it to her own agenda. The combination and the creak, Ilara's jaw tightened, the taste of ash in her mouth. She stared at Brenda, whose triumphant smirk felt like a physical blow. Mark stood by, a silent sentinel of Ilara's defeat, his gaze fixed on the antique safe as if it held the answers to all his unspoken questions. The air in the study thickened, heavy with unspoken accusations and simmering resentment. Well, Brenda prompted, her voice sharp as splintered glass. The combination, Ilara. We don't have all day. Ilara's eyes flickered to the safe, a dark, imposing sentinel in the corner. It wasn't just a strong box, it was a repository of shared laughter, whispered secrets, and the quiet comfort of Tom's presence. Giving up the combination felt like betraying him, like handing over the keys to her very soul. A fierce surge of protectiveness flared within her, but it was quickly doused by the cold, calculating glint in Brenda's eyes and Mark's averted gaze. She was outnumbered, outmaneuvered. Fine, Ilara said, her voice barely a whisper, strained and brittle. She took a deep, shaky breath, her gaze falling on a faded photograph of Tom on the nearby desk, his smile warm and genuine. It was a silent plea for strength, for understanding. It's Tom's birthday, the day we first met, July 10th. Mark's head snapped up, a flicker of something akin to surprise, perhaps even a pang of remorse, crossing his features. Brenda, however, merely nodded, her expression unwavering. Month, day, year, she pressed, oblivious to the intimate significance of the numbers. Ilara recited the full date, each digit a tiny shard of her heart splintering away. 7/10/1985. Brenda turned to Mark, a commanding gesture. There you have it. Get to it, Mark. Mark hesitated, his hands hovering over the safe's brass dial as if it might bite him. He glanced at Alara, a silent apology in his eyes, before steeling himself. He grasped the ornate dial, his knuckles white against the dark metal. The mechanism groaned softly as he began to turn it, his brow furrowed in concentration. The first click was almost imperceptible, a faint whisper in the hushed room. Then another, louder this time, followed by a series of soft, metallic snicks that echoed in the oppressive silence. Each turn of the dial seemed to stretch time, elongating the moment into an eternity. Ilara watched, a knot of dread tightening in her stomach. She felt exposed, vulnerable, as if her innermost thoughts were being laid bare. Mark's movements were slow, deliberate. Each digit entered with an almost ceremonial care. He was methodical, his breathing shallow. He paused, rechecked the numbers Ilara had given, then continued, his focus absolute. The tension in the room coiled tighter with every revolution of the dial. Brenda tapped her foot impatiently, a rhythmic thud against the Persian rug that only amplified the suspense. Finally, with a soft thunk, the internal tumbler shifted. Mark pulled on the large circular handle. It resisted, then gave way with a groan that seemed to emanate from the very depths of the safe. A long, drawn-out creak, like an ancient tree sighing in a storm, filled the room as the heavy metal door swung inward. The interior of the safe was surprisingly modest, not the trove of hidden treasures Brenda clearly expected. On the top shelf lay a stack of neatly bundled papers, secured with a faded silk ribbon. Beneath them, nestled in a small hollow, was a dark velvet box, its surface worn smooth from handling, and, resting right on top of the papers, was a thick cream-colored envelope, its edges crisp and uncreased, addressed simply to Ilara. Ilara's breath hitched. That envelope. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Tom had often mentioned a special letter, a final message he'd left for her, but she'd never known where he'd kept it. Now, seeing it there, pristine and waiting, a wave of conflicting emotions washed over her. Grief, a profound sense of loss, and a glimmer of hope that within those pages she might find some solace, some final connection to the man she loved. Brenda's eyes narrowed, sweeping over the contents. "Is that all?" she asked, her voice laced with disappointment, clearly expecting more. Her gaze lingered on the bundled papers for a moment, then shifted to the velvet box. Mark, meanwhile, was fixated on the envelope addressed to Ilara, a flicker of understanding dawning in his eyes. He reached out a hesitant hand, then pulled back, his gaze meeting Ilara's across the small study. The unspoken question hung in the air. What now? A rush to claim. The safe's precise click punctuated the tense hush, a sharp counterpoint to the room's forced intimacy. Mark swung the door wide, revealing its sparse contents, a modest stack of documents, a small obsidian velvet casket, and a single, substantial cream envelope, its seal bearing a familiar wax impression. The air, already thick with unspoken recriminations, seemed to constrict further. Brenda's calculating gaze sharpened into a predatory gleam. "Finally!" she hissed, a low, guttural note of triumph. Before Mark could fully inventory the items, her hand darted out, bypassing the papers and the missive. Her fingers, ablaze with a gaudy sapphire, snatched the velvet box with startling speed. She didn't bother with decorum. The lid was torn back, revealing a lone, resplendent diamond pendant nestled on aged white satin. "Ha!" Brenda crowed, yanking the necklace free. The diamond, though not enormous, captured the weak afternoon light, scattering miniature rainbows across the walls. "Just as I suspected. Mother's necklace. Knew Tom had it squirreled away. It's mine, naturally, as the eldest." She clutched it fiercely, her thumb caressing the cool metal, her eyes flicking to Alara, a blatant challenge. "Though I suppose you might have tried to claim it." Alara offered no reply, her focus already elsewhere. The diamond's sparkle barely registered, its allure overshadowed by a deeper, more profound drawl. She observed Brenda's grasping display with a disengaged sense of unreality, like watching a poorly rehearsed drama. Mark, having shed his initial surprise, now fixed his less aggressive but equally intense gaze on the stack of papers. He reached for them with a more deliberate hand, his brow furrowed in concentration. These must be the estate documents, he murmured, primarily to himself. Important business, no doubt. Tom was always so meticulous. He began fanning through them, a slight frown creasing his lips as he recognized Tom's old law firm letterhead. Yes, legal papers. I knew it. Brenda, this is probably the will. Powers of attorney. All the critical stuff. He cleared his throat, puffing out his chest in a fleeting bid for authority. Good thing we arrived when we did. Wouldn't want these falling into the wrong hands. His eyes flickered nervously to Elara, then away. A strange chill settled in Elara's stomach as she watched them. Their hasty movements, their acquisitive hands, their immediate assumptions of ownership, it all felt profoundly wrong. They were like scavengers, picking over the remains, oblivious to the man whose life had just been reduced to these few artifacts. The diamond, the papers, were mere symbols of their perceived entitlements. But then her gaze drifted to the last item, the one they had both overlooked, deemed less significant in their rush to claim. The thick cream-colored envelope. It lay undisturbed at the bottom of the safe, its wax seal bearing the impression of a simple oak leaf, a design Tom had always cherished. There was no mistaking his strong, distinctive handwriting on the front, a graceful cursive that had always brought a smile to her face. To Elara, her name, written with a flourish, seemed to hum with an almost palpable energy. A wave of warmth mingled with a piercing ache washed over her. This wasn't about glittering jewels or legal pronouncements. This was about Tom. This was from Tom. A tremor went through her hand as she reached for it. Her fingers, still slightly numb from the earlier confrontation, brushed against the substantial paper. It felt weighty, as if containing not just words, but a piece of him, a final communication. The scent of old paper and something subtly woody, like the faint, lingering aroma of Tom's pipe tobacco, seemed to emanate from it, pulling her back to countless evenings by the fire. Brenda, still admiring the necklace, spared a dismissive glance at the envelope. "What's that? A thank you note for the mailman?" she scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. "Honestly, Elara, always so sentimental. We're dealing with real business here." Mark, engrossed in a document about investment portfolios, merely grunted in agreement, his attention fixed on the figures. The clinking of the diamond against Brenda's ring was the only sound in the room other than the rustle of paper. Elara ignored them both. Their clamor, their self-interest, faded into a distant hum. All that mattered was the envelope. She lifted it slowly, almost reverently, feeling its weight in her palm. It wasn't just paper, it was a bridge, a direct line from the man she loved, a voice from beyond the silence. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic rhythm of anticipation and dread. She knew with an absolute certainty that transcended logic that whatever was inside this envelope held the real truth, the true legacy, and perhaps the answer she desperately sought. It wasn't a treasure to be claimed, but a conversation to be had. A final intimate whisper from Tom meant only for her, and she was ready to listen. The unveiling of Tom's words. The cool weight of the unmounted diamonds in Brenda's palm felt less substantial than the imagined value, but the gleam still held her captive. Mark, meanwhile, was rifling through a stack of documents, each rustle a promise of legal validation. Their attention, however, was a fragile thing, easily diverted. A shift in the room's energy, a subtle change in the air, drew their gazes simultaneously toward Elara. She hadn't moved from her kneeling position before the now open safe. Her fingers, delicate and almost reverent, traced the familiar script on the sealed envelope. It was Tom's hand unmistakable in its elegant loops and precise cross strokes. Brenda, sensing a pause in the treasure hunt, straightened, her brow furrowing with a mixture of curiosity and impatience. Mark, ever Brenda's shadow, mimicked her posture, a half-folded deed still clutched in his hand. Elara's breath hitched. This wasn't a will or a deed or a stock certificate. This was Tom, his essence distilled onto paper, waiting for her. She ran a thumb over the wax seal, a simple T pressed into the crimson, then carefully, almost painstakingly, broke it. The soft tearing sound was the only noise in the room, stark against the silence. Inside, a single sheet of cream-colored paper, folded once, revealed more of Tom's familiar handwriting. Her eyes blurred for a moment, the words swimming into an illegible script before she blinked back the tears. "What is that?" Brenda's voice, sharper than necessary, cut through the quiet. "More of his sentimental rubbish. I hope it's not another one of his haikus about the garden." She gestured dismissively with the diamond necklace, the stones catching the light, momentarily blinding. Elara ignored her, her focus entirely on the words before her. Her heart hammered a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She took a deep, steadying breath, then another, trying to calm the tremor in her hands. She knew instinctively that this letter was Tom's final, most intimate gift. It deserved to be heard, not just by her, but by them. She began to read, her voice a reedy whisper at first, then gaining a fragile strength. "My dearest Elara," she started, the opening words a balm and a wound all at once. "If you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you in body." Her voice caught, a small sob escaping. She pressed her lips together, squeezing her eyes shut for a fleeting moment before continuing. "But know that my love, like the stars, endures." Brenda shifted uncomfortably, the dismissive expression on her face hardening. Mark, however, had lowered the document he held, his gaze fixed on Elara, a flicker of something akin to genuine sadness in his eyes. Elara continued, her voice still wavering, but growing clearer with each word. "I've always admired your strength, Elara, your quiet resilience. You are more capable than you give yourself credit for, and far more discerning than many believe." A slight, almost imperceptible lift of Elara's chin accompanied this line, a faint spark in her eyes. Brenda scoffed a soft, derisive sound and rearranged the diamonds in her palm, as if to remind herself of a more tangible reality. Mark, however, seemed to flinch at his wife's interjection, his attention unwavering. "I know this time will be difficult," Elara read on, Tom's foresight echoing through the quiet room. "And I know there will be vultures circling, eager to pick at what they believe is left behind." Elara paused, her eyes lifting from the page to meet Brenda's. Brenda's face was a mask of indignation, a faint flush creeping up her neck. Mark looked away, his gaze falling to the floor. "But what truly matters," Elara continued, her voice now imbued with a steady, quiet power, "is not what can be taken, but what is given, what is shared. And the truth, Elara, always finds its way out." The air in the study grew thick with unspoken tension. Brenda's grip on the necklace tightened, the diamonds digging into her skin. Mark shifted his weight, his discomfort palpable. They had expected legalities, inheritances, tangible wealth. Instead, they were being confronted with something far more unsettling. The lingering wisdom of the man they had come to claim from. Elara, holding Tom's words, felt a subtle shift within herself. A new strength, a quiet resolve, began to bloom in the space grief had left raw. Tom's last message. Elara's voice, initially a fragile whisper, deepened with each word Tom had penned. She wasn't merely reading, she was channeling his presence, his unwavering affection. "My dearest Elara," she read, the phrase a warm balm against the raw grief. "If you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you in body. But please know, my love, my spirit remains tethered to yours, always." Brenda shifted impatiently, a rustle of expensive fabric. Get to the point, Elara. We don't have all day for sentimental drivel. Elara's gaze, steady and clear, lifted from the page to meet Brenda's sharp eyes. There was no tremor in her voice as she continued, the words now imbued with a quiet power. Tom's point, Brenda, seems to be love, something you might find unfamiliar. She paused for a beat, letting the barb settle before returning to the letter. You are the brightest star in my sky, Elara, the anchor that kept me grounded, the wings that allowed me to soar. Every moment with you was a gift, a profound joy I never imagined possible. Mark, who had been nervously picking at a loose thread on his cuff, looked up, a flicker of genuine sadness softening his features. He glanced at Brenda, a silent plea for decorum, but she merely huffed, arms crossed tightly over her chest. And now, to the practicalities, my clever girl, Elara read, a faint, bittersweet smile touching her lips. You opened this safe with a secret only we shared, a testament to our bond. What lies within these walls, therefore, belongs solely to you. Every document, every trinket, every last cent, it is all for you, Elara. Consider it my final act of ensuring your comfort and security. Brenda's jaw dropped. What? That's preposterous. Tom wouldn't. He always said the estate would be divided fairly. This is ridiculous. Fairly, Brenda, often means differently to different people, Elara countered, her voice gaining an edge of steel. She continued, letting Tom's prescient words echo in the tense silence. I know my family. I know their expectations, their entitlements. I can almost picture Brenda, red-faced and indignant, convinced she's been wronged, and poor Mark trying to mediate while simultaneously agreeing with her. But listen to me, Elara. Truly listen. This is my wish, my explicit instruction. Do not let them bully you. Do not let them diminish what we built together. This is your inheritance, not just of material possessions, but of my unwavering trust and love. The air in the study thickened, heavy with unspoken accusations and simmering resentment. Brenda's face was indeed a mottled red, her eyes narrowed to furious slits. This is a forgery, a trick. Tom would never cut his own sister out like this. Wouldn't he? Elara asked, her voice calm despite the tremor in her heart. He seemed to think he knew you quite well, she read on. The final paragraphs of the letter, a poignant testament to Tom's foresight and his deep desire to protect her. There might be legal challenges, Elara, attempts to invalidate my wishes, but know that I have taken every precaution. Consult with Mr. Henderson, my solicitor. He has all the necessary documentation to uphold this. Do not let grief make you weak. Be strong, my love. Fight for what is yours, for what we shared, for the future we dreamed of. Live fully, laugh often, and remember that my love for you transcends all boundaries, even death. Elara lowered the letter, her hand trembling slightly, but her gaze was resolute. The paper felt like a shield warm with Tom's essence. She looked at Brenda, whose face was a mask of furious disbelief, and then at Mark, whose shoulders slumped, his eyes fixed on the floor, a picture of quiet resignation. So there it is, Elara said, her voice clear and unwavering. Tom's last message, and it seems, Brenda, that your treasure hunt ends here. The contents of this safe, and indeed all of Tom's estate, are mine. She folded the letter with deliberate care, placing it back into the now empty safe, a gesture of reverence and defiance. The silence that followed was broken only by the rapid ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, each tick a hammer blow against Brenda's unraveling composure. A quiet retreat. The silence in the room became a palpable weight, pressing down on Brenda and Mark as Elara's voice continued, steady and clear, recounting Tom's final wishes. Each word, a deliberate hammer blow, chipped away at their assumptions, their hopes of an easy inheritance. Brenda's shoulders, which had been set in an aggressive posture of expectation, slowly began to slump. The vibrant color that had flushed her cheeks with indignation drained away, leaving her face a pasty white, her lips pressed into a thin, grim line. Mark, ever the more outwardly transparent, mirrored her dissent. His initial eagerness, a fleeting light in his usually guarded eyes, extinguished completely, replaced by a dull resignation. He shifted his weight, a nervous habit, and his gaze dropped to the patterned rug beneath his feet, unable to meet Elara's eyes. Elara's voice, though calm, resonated with a newfound authority, a quiet power that stemmed not from anger, but from an unshakable connection to Tom's intentions. She read the clauses concerning his carefully curated collection of antique maps, the vintage watch he'd inherited from their grandfather, even the old leather-bound journals filled with his adventurous tales. Each item which Brenda had mentally catalogued for herself or for Mark was explicitly bequeathed to Elara, accompanied by Tom's personal reasons, a shared memory, an inside joke, a testament to their life together. Brenda opened her mouth once, a sharp intake of breath signaling an objection, but no words came. The sheer specificity of Tom's instructions, the intimate details woven into each bequest, made any protest seem petty and hollow. He hadn't just listed items. He'd explained why they belonged with Elara, cementing her place as the sole inheritor of his tangible and intangible legacy. His foresight had disarmed them completely. The air grew heavy with their unspoken disappointment. The elaborate plans Brenda had likely concocted, how to divide the assets, what to sell, what to keep, evaporated like mist in the morning sun. The safe, which had symbolized a treasure trove of shared family wealth, now represented only a reaffirmation of Tom's singular devotion to Elara. The glint of avarice in Brenda's eyes, so prominent moments before, dulled to a flat, defeated stare. Mark simply nodded almost imperceptibly with each passing